So, this happened a few years ago. My buddy, let's call him Mark, was living in this small apartment in a pretty quiet neighborhood. The building was old, but nothing unusual about it. Just your typical place. Mark had lived there for a few months, and there was nothing strange. Just the usual city noise, the occasional creaking of old pipes, but otherwise, it was home. But one evening, when Mark was staying up late, watching TV and scrolling through his phone, he heard a knock at the door. Alright, ready to get scared? Turn off the lights, get cozy, and let the chill begin. It wasn't a soft knock, it was more like a pounding. He wasn't expecting anyone. He looked through the peephole, but didn't see anyone. The hallway was dark and empty. He shrugged it off, figuring it was probably some random mistake or maybe the neighbor's door. But then, the knocking came again. And this time, it was more urgent. It wasn't like the soft knocks you expect from someone just dropping by. It was sharp, almost frantic. Mark got a little freaked out, but he didn't want to make a sense. He opened the door slightly, just enough to see if someone was there. But the hallway was empty again. It was quiet. Too quiet. He closed the door and turned to go back to the couch. But then, he heard it again. This time, it came from the window. A soft tapping. Not a breeze or something. Just tapping. He felt his heart skip a bit. The window was on the second floor, and the building was surrounded by tall trees. Nobody would be outside there, right? He cautiously approached the window, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked out. Nothing. Just trees. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow move across the yard. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there. It was like his brain had played a trick on him. He figured maybe it was a wind or something. After all, it was late, and he was getting tired. Mark went to bed soon after. He's still a little uneasy, but he just tried to shake it off. The next few days were fine, and he forgot about the weird knocking. But then it happened again. This time, around 3 a.m. The knocking at the door was louder. Mark had a bad feeling, like someone was testing him, trying to get him to open the door. He didn't. Instead, he just stayed quiet and listened. Then came the tapping again. Soft, but then louder, like someone was slowly dragging their nails across the glass. It didn't stop. He got up, slowly, and crept to the window. His heart was racing now, and he felt cold sweat on his back. As he pulled the curtains back, there was nothing at first, just the reflection of the moon behind him. But then, in the reflection, he saw something standing right behind him in the window. He turned around. Nothing. When he looked back at the reflection, the figure was gone. It was like it was never there. Just that one moment. A flash. The next morning, Mark tried to tell himself it was just nerves. He didn't sleep well, so he was probably imagining things. But the knocking kept happening, and it kept getting worse and worse. Sometimes it was at the door, sometimes at the window. And it wasn't random. It always happened late at night. It escalated One night, Mark woke up to the sound of his door handle turning. Not the knocking, but the handle itself moving, like someone was trying to get in. He froze, terrified. He grabbed his phone to call someone, but the call wouldn't go through. The door handle stopped. A few seconds later, it started again. This time, there was a sound like scrapping coming from the floor near the door. He had no idea what to do. He was paralyzed, just standing there, listening to whatever was out there trying to get in. The door shook, as if someone was banging against it now. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The apartment fell into a complete silence. Mark stayed awake the rest of the night, waiting for it to start again. But it never did. The next morning, Mark decided he couldn't take it anymore. He called his landlord and told him about this strange occurrence. The landlord seemed a little too calm. He didn't ask too many questions, just offered to send someone to check the apartment. But when they came, they found nothing. No signs of breakings, no weird marks, no reason for the knocking or the tapping. They did, however, mention that the building had a history. Years ago, a man had died in the apartment next to Mark's. A neighbor had found him late one night after hearing loud, frantic knocking. It turned out the man had been locked inside his own apartment for days, and he died from a heart attack after trying to break the door down. The landlord said it wasn't uncommon for the building to have a few strange occurrences. Mark didn't know if it was some old superstition or if the landlord was just trying to get him off the phone. But things never really stopped. The knocking didn't go away, but after that conversation, it seemed to shift locations. Sometimes it would come from the ceiling, other times from the walls. Eventually, Mark moved out. He found another place, a different neighborhood. But a few months later, he heard that the apartment building had been sold. Someone else had moved into the unit he'd vacated. And that's when it got really weird. A few weeks after that, Mark ran into an old friend. Someone who used to live in that building years before. She mentioned that she had heard the same knocking sound, and she told him something chilling. The woman who had lived in that apartment before him had disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she went, and no one had ever been able to explain why her door was locked from inside when the police came. Mark had no idea what to think. Was it the building? Was it the land? Or it was something worse? The thing is, after he left, the knocking stopped. No one else reported it. And Mark? Well, he never went back to that place. This is the last thing Mark told me when I asked him about it recently. You know, sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones you can see or touch. They're things that follow you. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey to real-life horror. Remember, the scariest stories are often the ones that live next door. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and share your own scary experiences in the comments below. Until next time, keep your lights on and stay safe.